Imagine ego as an invisible architect, constructing barriers around us as we transition from the boundless potential of childhood into adulthood. As children, our minds are marvelously open, learning swiftly, mastering language, solving puzzles, and thinking critically, all without the shadow of ego. Yet, as we age, ego begins to shape our perceptions subtly but profoundly, injecting bias into our thoughts, convincing us we're above certain tasks or more enlightened than others. What if stripping away this ego could unleash a renewed capacity for growth, mirroring the fearless, unbiased learning of our youth? Join us as we explore how breaking free from the clutches of ego can open doors to a world where learning has no limits and personal development knows no bounds. Lesson 1. Unmasking the ego, the Stoics' path to true self-improvement. Have you ever felt that the biggest obstacle in your path is not the world around you, but the voice within? What if the barriers to your growth are self-imposed by an inflated ego that resists change? The Stoics believed that our ego is the enemy of progress, a shadow that blinds us to our own flaws and impedes genuine self-improvement. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." How often do we let our ego distort that power, keeping us from seeing ourselves clearly? By confronting and overcoming our ego, we unlock the true potential that lies dormant within us. Are you ready to embark on a journey to dismantle the ego and embrace authentic growth? What does it mean to let go of ego in our daily lives? The Stoics teach us that releasing ego allows us to respond to life's challenges with wisdom rather than pride. Epictetus advised, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Doesn't ego often trigger our worst reactions, pushing us to defend a false image rather than seek truth? By setting aside ego, we open ourselves to learning from failures and embracing humility. This shift transforms obstacles into opportunities, paving the way for resilience and personal evolution. Could it be that shedding ego is the first step toward mastering ourselves? Have you noticed how ego craves external validation, constantly seeking approval and recognition? The Stoics warned that this pursuit leads us away from inner peace and towards endless dissatisfaction. Seneca observed, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Isn't ego the source of that insatiable craving, keeping us trapped in a cycle of want? By finding contentment within ourselves, we break free from the chains of ego-driven desires. How might your life change if you measured wealth not by what you acquire, but by what you can live happily without? Modern Stoic philosopher Ryan Holiday echoes these ancient insights, emphasizing that ego undermines our ability to learn and grow. He writes, "Ego is the enemy of what you want and of what you have, of mastering a craft, of real creative insight, of working well with others, of building loyalty and support." Do you see how ego isolates us, cutting us off from collaboration and genuine connection? The Stoics encourage us to replace ego with curiosity and openness. What possibilities might unfold if we approached life not with arrogance but with a learner's mindset? Consider how ego resists feedback, perceiving it as a threat rather than a gift. The Stoics viewed criticism as an opportunity for self-improvement. They embraced the idea that we are all works in progress, continually refining ourselves. Marcus Aurelius advised, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." Isn't it liberating to prioritize truth over the need to be right? How different would our interactions be if we welcomed insights from others without ego's defensiveness? Ego often convinces us that we are the center of the universe, blinding us to the interconnectedness the Stoics spoke of. They believe that we are part of a greater whole, and understanding this fosters compassion and justice. By diminishing ego, we expand our capacity to empathize and act with kindness. Epictetus taught, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." Could releasing ego help us see the world through others' eyes, deepening our relationships and enriching our lives? Have you ever reflected on how ego fuels anxiety about the future or regret about the past? The Stoics emphasized living in the present moment, free from ego's distortions. Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." By anchoring ourselves in the now, we sidestep ego's tendency to dwell on what was or what might be. What if embracing the present could alleviate the burdens that ego places upon us? Ultimately, the Stoics guide us toward a life where ego does not dictate our choices or limit our potential. They invite us to cultivate virtues like wisdom, courage, and temperance, which flourish when ego subsides. Modern philosopher Massimo Pigliucci reinforces this, stating, "The Stoics understood that to be virtuous is to act according to the best of our human nature, which includes being rational and social beings." Are you willing to let go of ego to become the best version of yourself? By recognizing ego as the enemy of self-improvement, we open the door to profound personal transformation. The Stoics offer timeless wisdom, urging us to look inward and challenge the ego that hinders our growth. As you reflect on these ideas, ask yourself, what steps can I take today to unmask my ego and embrace the path of genuine self-improvement? Lesson 2. Embracing humility. How ego blocks our path to wisdom. Have you ever considered that the greatest barrier to learning might be the belief that you already know? What if our ego creates a wall that prevents wisdom from entering our lives? The Stoics teach us that humility is the foundation of true knowledge, and ego is the enemy that keeps us ignorant. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." How often does our ego convince us that we have nothing more to learn, stalling our growth and understanding? By embracing humility, we open ourselves to new perspectives and insights. Could shedding our ego be the key to unlocking deeper wisdom? What does it mean to cultivate humility in our pursuit of knowledge? The Stoics encourage us to approach life as perpetual students, always eager to learn. Seneca advised, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." Isn't it ego that tells us we've already mastered life's lessons, causing us to stagnate? By acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, we create space for growth and enlightenment. How might your life transform if you approached each day with the curiosity of a beginner? Consider how ego resists admitting mistakes, fearing that doing so diminishes our worth. The Stoics saw error as an opportunity for improvement, not a cause for shame. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after." Isn't it liberating to value truth over the need to be right? By setting aside ego, we embrace correction as a path to wisdom. What could you learn if you allowed yourself to be wrong sometimes? Modern Stoic philosopher Donald Robertson emphasizes the importance of self-awareness in overcoming ego. He notes, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." Doesn't ego fixate on controlling how others perceive us, trapping us in a cycle of pretense? By focusing on our own development rather than external approval, we gain true mastery over ourselves. How might releasing ego's grip on your image free you to become your authentic self? Have you noticed how ego breeds defensiveness, closing us off from constructive feedback? The Stoics teach that welcoming criticism is essential for personal growth. Epictetus advised, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these.'" Isn't this a profound example of humility, turning criticism into self-reflection? By not letting ego take offense, we turn potential conflicts into opportunities for self-improvement. How different would your interactions be if you received feedback without ego's interference? Ego often pushes us to compare ourselves to others, fostering envy and resentment. The Stoics remind us that true contentment comes from within, not from measuring ourselves against external standards. Seneca observed, "You ask what is the proper limit to a person's wealth. First, having what is essential, and second, having what is enough." Isn't ego that insatiable voice telling us we need more to be worthy? By embracing humility, we find satisfaction in sufficiency. What peace might you find by appreciating what you have rather than longing for more? Reflect on how ego can make us dismiss the wisdom of others, especially if it challenges our beliefs. The Stoics valued open-mindedness and the collective pursuit of truth. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Do not be wise in words, be wise in deeds." Isn't ego satisfied with appearing knowledgeable, while humility drives us to embody our principles? By listening more and speaking less, we learn from the experiences of those around us. How might your understanding deepen if you approached conversations with the intent to learn rather than to impress? Ultimately, the Stoics guide us to see that humility is not a weakness but a strength that dismantles ego's barriers. By embracing humility, we align ourselves with the path of wisdom and self-improvement. Are you willing to let go of ego to become a true student of life? By recognizing how ego blocks our path to wisdom, we take a significant step toward personal transformation. The Stoics offer timeless guidance, encouraging us to humble ourselves in the pursuit of truth and growth. As you contemplate these insights, ask yourself, what can you do today to practice humility and overcome the ego that hinders your journey to wisdom? Lesson 3. The Mirage of External Validation. How ego derails true fulfillment. Have you ever found yourself chasing approval, only to feel emptier once you've obtained it? What if the constant pursuit of recognition is a trap set by our own ego, pulling us away from genuine happiness? The Stoics believed that seeking validation from others feeds the ego and starves the soul. Epictetus taught, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Isn't it ego that inflates our desires, convincing us that we need more applause, more accolades, more of everything external? By breaking free from this illusion, we can discover that true contentment comes from within. Could it be that letting go of ego's need for external validation is the key to lasting fulfillment? Consider how ego drives us to compare ourselves with others, measuring our worth by external standards. The Stoics urge us to find value in our own character, not in how we stack up against those around us. Seneca observed, "Man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems." Isn't it ego that creates these imagined anxieties, pushing us to compete in a race with no finish line? By focusing on our own path and inner virtues, we liberate ourselves from ego's relentless comparisons. How might your life change if you stopped looking outward for approval and instead nurtured your own sense of worth? Have you noticed how fleeting the satisfaction is when we achieve external success? The Stoics remind us that fame and fortune are transient, offering no real substance to our lives. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "The fame and success are fleeting and ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme of the cosmos." Isn't it ego that blinds us to this truth, convincing us that external achievements will bring lasting happiness? By recognizing the impermanence of these pursuits, we can redirect our energy toward cultivating inner virtues. What enduring fulfillment might you find by investing in your character rather than your image? Modern Stoic philosopher Massimo Pigliucci echoes this sentiment, emphasizing that true wealth is found in self-mastery and virtue. He writes, "A man should so live that his happiness shall depend as little as possible on external things." Doesn't ego make us dependent on the whims of others, tying our happiness to factors beyond our control? By releasing ego's hold, we reclaim our power to define our own contentment. Could embracing this perspective free you from the roller coaster of external validation? Think about how ego's hunger for recognition can strain our relationships. The Stoics encourage us to act justly and with compassion, fostering genuine connections. Epictetus advised, "Other people's views and troubles can be contagious. Don't sabotage yourself by unwittingly adopting negative, unproductive attitudes through your associations with others." Isn't ego that entices us into negative cycles, prioritizing image over integrity? By prioritizing virtue over vanity, we strengthen our bonds with others. How might your relationships deepen if you engaged with humility instead of ego? Have you ever felt that no amount of praise or success is ever enough? The Stoics teach that this insatiable appetite is ego's doing. a void that cannot be filled from the outside. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Isn't it ego that keeps us in a state of perpetual craving, preventing us from appreciating what we have? By practicing gratitude and contentment, we silence ego's demands. What peace could you experience by embracing sufficiency over scarcity? Ultimately, the Stoics guide us to understand that external validation is a mirage, an illusion crafted by ego that distracts us from true fulfillment. By turning inward and cultivating our inner virtues, we find a wellspring of contentment that external accolades can never provide. Are you ready to abandon the chase for external approval and discover the richness within? By recognizing how ego leads us astray with the illusion of external validation, we take a crucial step toward authentic self-improvement. The Stoics offer timeless wisdom, inviting us to focus on what truly matters. As you reflect on these ideas, ask yourself, what can you do today to release ego's grip on your need for external validation and embrace the contentment that comes from within? Lesson 4, the Saboteur Within. How ego amplifies our suffering. Have you ever wondered why certain challenges seem to weigh heavier on you than they do on others? What if the pain we feel is intensified not by the events themselves, but by our ego's reaction to them? The Stoics believe that ego is the inner saboteur that magnifies our suffering, turning obstacles into insurmountable walls. Epictetus taught, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." Isn't it ego that distorts our perceptions, making molehills into mountains? By recognizing and overcoming ego's influence, we can alleviate unnecessary pain and navigate life's hurdles with greater ease. Could releasing the ego's grip be the key to transforming our suffering into strength? Consider how ego leads us to personalize every setback, convincing us that the universe is conspiring against us. The Stoics remind us that adversity is a natural part of life, not a personal affront. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "Reject your sense of injury, and the injury itself disappears." Isn't it ego that clings to the notion of being wronged, prolonging our pain? By shifting our perspective, we can view challenges objectively, reducing the emotional toll they take on us. How might your experience of hardship change if you removed ego from the equation? Have you noticed how ego resists the acceptance of things beyond our control, fueling frustration and despair? The Stoics teach that peace comes from distinguishing between what we can and cannot influence. Modern Stoic philosopher William Irvine explains, "By contemplating the impermanence of everything in the world, we can learn to enjoy things without clinging to them." Isn't it ego that insists on control, causing us distress when reality doesn't align with our desires? By embracing acceptance, we free ourselves from ego's chains. What serenity might you find by letting go of ego's need to control the uncontrollable? Think about how ego amplifies our emotional reactions, turning discomfort into agony. The Stoics encourage emotional resilience through the practice of temperance and self-control. Seneca advised, "Wild animals run from the dangers they actually see, and once they have escaped them, worry no more. We, however, are tormented by what is past and what is to come." Isn't it ego that keeps us tethered to past wounds and future anxieties, intensifying our suffering? By living in the present moment, we can diminish ego's power over our emotions. How might your emotional well-being improve by focusing on the here and now? Consider how ego fosters resentment and bitterness when life doesn't meet our expectations. The Stoics remind us that expectations set by ego are often unrealistic and lead to unnecessary pain. Epictetus observed, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." Isn't it ego that fixates on others' shortcomings while ignoring our own, deepening our dissatisfaction? By cultivating empathy and self-awareness, we can dissolve resentment. What peace might you achieve by releasing ego's grip on your expectations? Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle of negative thoughts that exacerbate your suffering? The Stoics teach that we have the power to change our thoughts, and consequently, our experience of the world. Modern philosopher Sharon Lebel notes, We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Isn't it ego that fuels negative thinking, convincing us that we are victims rather than agents of change? By consciously redirecting our thoughts, we weaken ego's influence and reduce our suffering. How different would your life be if you took control of your inner dialogue? Ultimately, the Stoics guide us to understand that much of our suffering is self-inflicted through the distortions of ego. By identifying and dismantling ego's narratives, we can alleviate unnecessary pain and build resilience. Are you willing to confront the saboteur within and reclaim your peace of mind? By acknowledging how ego amplifies our suffering, we make a decisive move toward authentic self-improvement. The Stoics offer timeless wisdom, encouraging us to look inward and challenge the ego-driven thoughts that hinder our happiness. As you contemplate these insights, ask yourself, what steps can I take today to quiet my ego and transform my suffering into personal growth? Lesson 5. The Chains of Superiority. How ego limits our potential to grow and learn. Have you ever felt so confident in your abilities that you dismissed new ideas or avoided taking risks? What if the very belief that we are above others is the barrier that prevents us from reaching our full potential? The Stoics teach us that ego not only blinds us to our own limitations, but also hinders our capacity to learn and evolve. Epictetus warned, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." Isn't it ego that whispers we have nothing left to learn, that we are already at the pinnacle of wisdom? By humbling ourselves and recognizing that there is always more to understand, we open the door to endless growth. Could setting aside our ego be the key to unlocking untapped possibilities? Consider how ego makes us risk-averse, fearing failure because it threatens our self-image. The Stoics encourage us to embrace challenges and view failures as stepping stones to success. Seneca observed, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." Isn't it ego that keeps us waiting for the perfect moment, avoiding risks to protect our pride? By taking action despite uncertainties, we expand our horizons and discover new strengths. How might your life transform if you dared to step beyond ego's comfort zone? Have you ever dismissed someone's ideas because you felt you knew better? The Stoics remind us that wisdom can come from anyone, and ego blocks us from receiving it. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." Isn't it ego that makes us cling to our own viewpoints while disregarding others? By approaching each interaction with openness and humility, we allow ourselves to learn from every person we meet. What new insights might you gain by setting aside ego and truly listening? Modern Stoic philosopher Ryan Holiday emphasizes that ego is the enemy of ambition and exploration. He writes, "Ego tells us that meaning comes from activity, that being the center of attention is the only way to matter. Doesn't ego confine us to familiar paths, discouraging us from exploring uncharted territories? By overcoming ego, we find the courage to take risks and pursue authentic passions. Could releasing ego's grip empower you to venture into new endeavors?" Think about how ego convinces us that we are superior, creating a barrier between ourselves and others. The Stoics teach that we are all interconnected, and humility fosters genuine relationships. Epictetus stated, "We are all members of one great body, planted by nature." Isn't it ego that isolates us, making us believe we stand alone above the rest? By acknowledging our shared humanity, we cultivate empathy and collaboration. How might your connections deepen if you approached others as equals rather than competitors? Consider how ego limits our learning by making us defensive in the face of feedback. The Stoics valued self-improvement over pride. Seneca wrote, "While we teach, we learn." Isn't it ego that resists correction, viewing it as an attack rather than an opportunity? By embracing feedback, we accelerate our growth and refine our abilities. What advancements could you make by welcoming insights from others without ego's interference? Ultimately, the Stoics guide us to see that ego is a chain that binds us to mediocrity, preventing us from taking risks, learning, and realizing our full potential. By shedding ego, We liberate ourselves to explore, grow, and connect more deeply with the world around us. Are you ready to break free from ego's constraints and step into the vast expanse of your potential? By understanding how ego limits our ability to take risks and learn, we take a significant stride toward self-improvement. The Stoics offer timeless wisdom, urging us to embrace humility and openness. As you reflect on these ideas, ask yourself, what steps can you take today to silence your ego and unlock the boundless opportunities that await you? Lesson 6. The Hidden Citadel. How ego blocks access to our inner strength. Have you ever searched for inner peace amid life's chaos, only to feel more unsettled? What if the true sanctuary you seek is within you, but your ego stands guard at its gates? The Stoics spoke of an inner citadel, a fortress of resilience and tranquility that exists within each person. Marcus Aurelius encouraged, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Isn't it our ego that often distracts us, convincing us to focus on external validations rather than nurturing this inner stronghold? By setting aside ego, we can access this citadel and tap into a wellspring of inner strength. Are you ready to discover how releasing ego can unlock the hidden fortress within you? Consider how ego fixates on controlling external circumstances, leaving us vulnerable when things don't go as planned. The Stoics teach that true power lies not in manipulating the outside world, but in mastering ourselves. Epictetus asserted, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Isn't ego the chain that binds us, making us prisoners to external events and others' opinions? By relinquishing ego's hold, we gain the freedom to navigate life's challenges with grace and confidence. How different would your life be if you drew strength from within, rather than seeking it elsewhere? Have you noticed how ego resists introspection, fearing what we might uncover about ourselves? The Stoics practiced daily self-reflection to cultivate virtue and wisdom. Seneca advised, "Other people's views and troubles can be contagious. Don't sabotage yourself by unwittingly adopting negative, unproductive attitudes through your associations with others." Isn't it ego that leads us to adopt masks, hiding our true selves even from ourselves? By embracing honesty and shedding ego, we open the door to genuine self-improvement. What insights might you gain by looking inward without ego's distortion? Modern Stoic philosopher Sharon Labelle emphasizes the importance of inner focus over external distraction. She writes, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." Doesn't ego lure us into valuing the uncontrollable, amplifying our anxieties and diminishing our inner peace? By redirecting our attention inward, we strengthen our inner citadel against the storms of external chaos. Could this shift help you find stability in an ever-changing world? Think about how ego feeds on external validation, leaving us empty when applause fades. The Stoics remind us that true contentment comes from self-approval grounded in virtue. Marcus Aurelius observed, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Isn't it ego that clutters our minds with worries about status and recognition? By cultivating a virtuous mindset, we fill our inner citadel with lasting fulfillment. How might your sense of self-worth improve if it were built on your values rather than others' opinions? Consider how ego creates false narratives about our abilities, either inflating or deflating our true potential. The Stoics encourage us to see ourselves clearly, embracing both strengths and weaknesses. Epictetus taught, "Man, know thyself, then thou shalt know the universe and God." Isn't it ego that blinds us to self-knowledge, hindering our growth? By removing ego's veil, we can assess ourselves honestly and embark on a path of meaningful development. What could you achieve if you understood and accepted yourself fully? Ego often drives us to resist fate, causing unnecessary suffering. The Stoics believed that acceptance leads to tranquility. Modern philosopher Ryan Holiday notes, "Ego is the enemy of what you want and of what you have." Isn't it ego that battles reality, draining our inner resources? By accepting what we cannot change, we conserve our strength for what we can influence, our own thoughts and actions. What peace might you find by aligning with reality rather than fighting it? Ultimately, the Stoics guide us to recognize that ego is the barrier between us and our inner citadel, the source of true strength and serenity. By overcoming ego, we unlock the gates to this hidden fortress and find the resilience to face life's trials. Are you prepared to lay down ego's burdens and enter your inner stronghold? By understanding how ego blocks access to our inner strength, we take a pivotal step toward authentic self-improvement. The Stoics offer timeless wisdom, urging us to turn inward and cultivate the virtues that fortify our inner citadel. As you reflect on these ideas, ask yourself, what can I do today to dismantle ego's barriers and discover the profound strength that lies within me? Lesson 7. The illusion of control. How ego hinders our acceptance. Have you ever struggled against the tide of circumstances, only to find yourself exhausted and no closer to your goal? What if the true obstacle isn't the world around you, but the ego within that refuses to accept what cannot be changed? The Stoics teach us that clinging to an illusion of control feeds our ego and obstructs our path to inner peace. Epictetus reminds us, there is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. How often does our ego trick us into believing we can bend fate to our desires? By releasing this illusion, we align ourselves with the natural flow of life. Are you ready to explore how surrendering ego-driven control can lead to genuine serenity? What does it mean to embrace fate without ego's interference? The Stoics encourage us to accept life's events as they unfold, understanding that our power lies in our responses, not in the circumstances themselves. Seneca observed, "A man should so live that his happiness shall depend as little as possible on external things." Isn't it ego that ties our happiness to external outcomes, leaving us vulnerable to disappointment? By detaching from ego's demands, we find freedom in accepting what is, rather than fixating on what we think should be. How might your life improve if you shifted focus from controlling the uncontrollable to mastering your own perceptions? Have you considered how ego fuels resistance to life's inevitable changes? The Stoics believed that fighting against fate only deepens our suffering. Modern Stoic philosopher Massimo Pigliucci explains, "The Stoics understood that to be virtuous is to act according to the best of our human nature, which includes being rational and social beings." Isn't ego irrational when it insists on its own way despite reality? By letting go of ego, we engage with the world as it is, not as our ego demands it to be. Could releasing ego's grip help you navigate life's transitions with grace and resilience? Ego often whispers that accepting fate is a sign of weakness, but the Stoics saw it as a profound strength. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together." Doesn't ego isolate us, making us resentful of circumstances and others? By embracing fate, we open ourselves to deeper connections and unexpected opportunities. What possibilities could arise if you welcomed each moment without ego's judgment? Imagine viewing challenges not as burdens, but as catalysts for growth. The Stoics taught that obstacles are essential for developing virtue. Epictetus stated, "Man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems." Isn't it ego that magnifies our fears, creating mountains out of molehills? By setting aside ego, we see challenges for what they are, temporary hurdles that we have the inner strength to overcome. How different would your approach be if you saw each setback as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block? Consider how ego clings to expectations, leading to perpetual dissatisfaction. The Stoics encourage us to release these expectations to find contentment. Modern philosopher William Irvine notes, "We should want events to happen as they do happen because it is futile to wish for things to happen otherwise." Isn't ego the source of our futile wishes, causing us unnecessary pain? By accepting events as they occur, we free ourselves from ego's trap of perpetual longing. What freedom might you experience by embracing the present without ego's demands? Have you ever felt burdened by the need to control how others perceive you? Ego often ties our self-worth to external validation, causing us to live inauthentically. The Stoics remind us that our true value comes from within. Seneca wrote, "What difference does it make how much you have? What you do not have amounts to much more." Isn't ego preoccupied with appearances and possessions, overshadowing our inner richness? By diminishing ego, we allow our genuine selves to shine, fostering deeper fulfillment. How might your relationships transform if you presented yourself without ego's mask? Ultimately, the Stoics guide us to understand that accepting fate is not about resignation, but about empowerment. By letting go of ego's illusion of control, we tap into a wellspring of inner peace and strength. Are you willing to set aside ego to embrace the flow of life more fully? By recognizing how ego hinders our acceptance of fate, we take a crucial step towards self-improvement. The Stoics offer timeless wisdom, inviting us to live in harmony with the universe rather than in conflict with it. As you ponder these insights, ask yourself, what can I do today to release ego's hold and find peace in the acceptance of my life's journey?